Greetings. Today we continue in our study of the book of Revelation and the further evidences of rapture, part 4. We'll begin considering the subject, the Glassy Sea, from Revelation chapter 4 and the first part of verse 6, where it says, "And before the throne there was a sea of glass like unto crystal." This glassy sea is number 6 of 7 things to which we're introduced in Revelation chapter 4. They speak to the fact that the rapture has already occurred in the scene which John sees. The glassy sea refers to clear ablution. Note, ablution and not absolution is in view. Ablution means to wash away. Absolution is the pronouncing of one's sins remitted by a priest during a sacrament. The Bible clearly teaches that men do not have the power to remit sins. Only God has the power and authority to take away the power, the penalty, and the presence of sin. Further, God has clearly stated the conditions under which he will remit a man's sins. That is repentance toward God and faith toward Jesus Christ, as it is recorded in Acts chapter 20 and verse 21. Now you'll find very little commentary has been written concerning this glassy sea. However, there is almost universal agreement concerning this subject in what has been written. Again, I would remind us that God has given us earthly shadows of these heavenly things. So we must look to the Old Testament tabernacle and temple for the meaning concerning this glassy sea. Specifically, we will look to the laver in the tabernacle and to the molten sea of Solomon's temple. These two answer to the glassy sea. However, we will find a necessary change. The laver was for the priest to wash. They were required to do so in the water that was placed in this reservoir before entering into the holy place to attend to the spiritual worship and work of God. The laver of the tabernacle is described in Exodus chapter 30, beginning at verse 18, where it says, "Thou shalt also make a laver of brass, and his foot also of brass to wash withal. And thou shalt put it between the tabernacle of the congregation and the altar, and thou shalt put water therein. For Aaron and his sons shall wash their hands and their feet thereat. When they go into the tabernacle of the congregation, they shall wash with water that they die not. Or when they come near to the altar to minister, to burn offering made by fire unto the Lord. So shall they wash their hands and their feet that they die not, and it shall be a statute forever to them, even to him and to his seed throughout their generations." The molten sea of Solomon's temple is described in 1 Kings chapter 7, verses 23 through 39 and 43 and 44. 1 Kings 7:23 begins, "And he made a molten sea, 10 cubits from the one brim to the other, that is 15 feet. It was round all about, and his height was 5 cubits, that's 7.5 feet. And the line of 30 cubits, 45 feet, did compass it around," or its circumference. "And under the brim of it round about, there were knops compassing it 10 in a cubit, compassing the sea round about. The knops were cast 2 in a row when it was cast. It stood upon 12 oxen, 3 looking toward the north, 3 looking toward the west, 3 looking toward the south, and 3 looking toward the east. And the sea was set above upon them, and all their hinder parts were inward. And it was a handbreadth thick, and the brim thereof was wrought like the brim of a cup, with flowers of lilies. It contained 2,000 baths." That's about 12,000 gallons, as I understand. "And he made 10 bases of brass. 4 cubits was the length of one base, and 4 cubits the length thereof, and 3 cubits the height thereof. And the work of the bases was on this manner. They had borders, and the borders were between the ledges. And on the borders that were between the ledges were lions, oxen, and cherubims. And upon the ledges there was a base above, and beneath the lion and oxen were certain additions made of thin work. And every base had 4 brazen wheels and plates of brass, and the 4 corners thereof had undersetters. Under the laver were the undersetters molten at the side of every addition. And the mouth of it within the capiter and above was a cubit, but the mouth thereof was round after the work of the base, a cubit and a half. And also upon the mouth of it were gravings with their borders, 4 square, not round. And under the borders were 4 wheels, and the axle trees of the wheels were joined to the base, and the height of a wheel was a cubit and half a cubit. And the work of the wheels was like the work of a chariot wheel. Their axle trees and their naves and their felloes and their spokes were all molten. And there were 4 undersetters to the 4 corners of one base, and the undersetters were of the very base itself. And in the top of the base there was a round compass of a half a cubit high, and on the top of the base the ledges thereof and the borders thereof were of the same. For on the plates of the ledges thereof and on the borders thereof he graved cherubims, lions, and palm trees, according to the proportion of every one, and additions round about. After this manner he made the 10 bases. All of them had 1 casting, 1 measure, and 1 size. Then he made 10 lavers of brass, 1 laver containing 40 baths, or about 240 gallons, and every laver was 4 cubits, that's 6 feet high, and upon every one of the 10 bases 1 laver. And he put 5 bases on the right side of the house, and 5 on the left side of the house. And he set the sea on the right side of the house eastward over against the south. And the 10 bases and the 10 lavers on the bases, and 1 sea and 12 oxen under the sea. The purpose of this laver was for the cleansing of the priest prior to entering into the presence of the Lord in the holy place. God is holy, therefore we must be clean in order to enter into his presence.